Welcome, folks. Tonight's talk, as Gavin has mentioned, is about Ballylesson at the parish of Drumbo and the graveyard there. So, folks who don't know where this graveyard is, it's on the back road to Lisburn, and it overlooks the Giant's Ring. The image to the right of the anchor, tangled up in rope, that is just as you go into the graveyard, and you'll see the parish church there in the background. So an anchor, as folks might know, tangled up. An anchor is an early Christian symbol, and an anchor tangled up in rope symbolizes death. And then the lady to the left, then, that is Lorna Dornan, and she was Jamie Dornan's mum, so she'll feature shortly. The church has existed in this site from 1791, and it was erected at the instigation of the Marquis of Downshire, Willis Hill, and the site was chosen and work was commenced. The architect, on the Marquis's advice, was Charles Lilly of Dublin, and the land belonged to James de Beer, and I'll mention the de Beer again shortly, who gave the land for free and forever to the parishioners of Drumbo. I want to take a virtual tour around the graveyard, and I'll be calling it 20 headstones, and they'll be in chronological order. For David Lamb, that means date order. First one's this one, and this is the bat headstone, so it's a very unusual looking headstone. It's behind near the church car park. You'll see there's a couple of bat graves. The first one in the foreground is a bat grave, and then the one with the big tower on it then is also a bat grave. So Narcissus Bat was a founding member of the Belfast Bank and was instrumental in having the church Drumbo enlarged by adding two transepts and the chancel. That was about 1863 or 64. This followed the 1859 revival, which saw a great increase in church attendance, which necessitated many churches to be extended, including Drumbo. The grandson of Narcissus, Robert Narcissus Bat, re-roofed the church and extended the windows in the nave in 1874. So the next one then is the Hugo heritage, and it says there in their headstone. So William de Beer was born around 1522 in the province of Orange in France, and he lived also at Galwally in County Down. And then you'll see there William also lived at Beaver House, and then another de Beer or Beers, he lived at Edenderry House nearby at Ballylesson, and then another one, William Ballygore, lived at Ballygorian and Ballylesson. And then the left-hand panel, and you'll see the other de Beers lived at Ballyward outside Banbridge and Ballylesson. And then on the right one, you'll see there's a reference, on the left one at the top, third line down, Brook Cottage in Newcastle. Those are basically some of the residences that the De Beers would have lived in. And Beaver House, a successive Beaver House, was set in a domain of nearly 6,500 acres, and it was built in 1876. So that's the Beers of Hugo heritage. Huguenot heritage, sorry. The next one is this one, and this is just as you come into the entrance of the graveyard. And this commemorates Walter Dawson Mitchell, and that's him photographed on the right. So Walter Dawson Mitchell featured in Nigel Henderson's talk on Friday night about the Lusitania. He was 27 when he was traveling on board the Lusitania with his wife Jeanette and their 10-month-old son, pictured there, also named Walter, and Jeanette's brother John Moore. Walter was the second son of the Reverend G.P. Mitchell, rector of Drumbo, in other words, the church where he's buried in the graveyard. He and Jeanette had been childhood sweethearts, and Walter had been an apprentice at the Island Spinning Company in Lisburn and was offered a job as the assistant manager of the Marshall's Mills in Kearney New Jersey in the United States in December of 1912. He married his childhood sweetheart, Jeanette, and they went to live with Mrs. R.M. Crozier of 177 Brook Street, Newark in New Jersey. Walter Jr. was born to them in August 1914. In the spring of 1915, the Mitchells decided to return to Ireland to visit their parents in Lisburn. Jeanette's brother had been living in Connecticut in 1911 and planned to enlist for the war effort once he reached Ireland. Walter, Jeanette, and their 10-month-old son and John sailed on Lusitania on 1st May 1915. Jeanette recalled when the ship passed by where Titanic sank in 1912, some passengers threw wreaths into the sea. On the 7th of May, the Mitchells and John had just finished lunch, and Jeanette went to the cabin to see the baby, and they felt a great crash which shook the ship. Taking the baby, the Mitchells and John followed the rest of the passengers to the upper decks to find out what had happened. John managed to get into a lifeboat which overturned whilst being lowered. Walter, Jeanette, and their baby all struggled in the water, with Walter holding the baby. Jeanette saw her husband slip into unconsciousness, his last words to her being, "I can't hold on anymore, Nettie." Jeanette herself was barely alive and men pulled her out of the water and onto a minesweeper. Walter and the baby were also brought on board their bodies. John, then it is said that in Queenstown, a cove, John saw Jeanette and Walter lying amongst the corpses on the harbour steps of Queenstown. He thought he saw Jeanette's eyelids move and realised she was alive, and he managed to resuscitate her. Walter Jr., in other words, the baby there, is buried in the old church cemetery in Queenstown, now Cove, as I say. And Walter himself is buried there, so he's commemorated just his interment there is commemorated in the middle panel. And Jeanette remarried, 2 more children, and is buried in the graveyard, but not with Walter. I'll show you where she's buried shortly in the graveyard. So you have the 3 of the family all buried in different locations. Walter is buried there. His wife Jeanette is buried elsewhere in the graveyard, and then the baby then, as I said, is buried down in Cove. So the next one then is this one, and it's a Commonwealth War grave, and you'll see it commemorates J. O'Donnell, Royal Irish Fusiliers, died 14th of December 1915, aged 38. He was serving with the 1st Garrison Battalion, formerly 5707 Royal Irish Rifles, when he died, as I say, 14th of December 1915, aged 38. He was born at Ballylesson. He was the son of John O'Donnell. So I think that's John's final resting place there beside, to the right of the Commonwealth War grave. And Private O'Donnell was the husband of Jane O'Donnell, and he was living at Caroline Road in Belfast. The next one then is this one, the Martin grave. A little bit hard to read, but it says William John Martin entered rest 22nd of June 1916, aged 66 years. And then it says for 30 years he was in the employment of the Great Northern Railway, Ireland, 20 of which as one of the chief confidential assistants in head office in Belfast. Also for 9 years he was the secretary of the Belfast Ropeworks Company Limited, in other words at Conswater, and for 9 years secretary of the Belfast Wholesale Merchants Association Limited, and he died, as I said, on the 22nd of June 1916, aged 60. Next one is this one. It's quite hard to make out, but thanks to Nigel for the photograph. It commemorates, you'll see the 5th line down, Archibald Moore, 2nd Lieutenant Royal Irish Rifles, killed in action 26th of March 1918. Archibald Moore was born on 2nd of August 1889 at Ballycowan, Ballylesson, to William Henry Moore and Mary Moore ní Allen, who later farmed land at Ballycorn. He was educated at Malone National School and was a draper's apprentice when he enlisted with the North Irish Horse on 4th September 1914 and was deployed to France on 1st May 1915. On 27th of June 1917, he received a commission in the Royal Irish Rifles being initially posted to the 20th Reserve Battalion. He was posted to the 13th Battalion, which was amalgamated with the 11th Battalion in 1918 to form the 22nd Entrenching Battalion. Archibald Moore was killed in action on 26 March 1918, aged 28. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the Pozier Memorial in France. That's that. And also in the memorial inside the church. But also buried in that plot is Walter Dawson Mitchell's wife, Jeanette. You'll see there she's commemorated at the bottom of the headstone. Jeanette, widow of W.D. Waters, in other words, her second husband after Mitchell went down with or drowned on the Lusitania. So also from my mum and dad, you'll see about the 8th line down there, another person died in Wanstead Park in London. So we grew up, me and my brother, in Wanstead Drive, but not that one in Dundonald, a bit less international. The next one then is this one, Robinson. It commemorates, as you'll see there, Pilot Officer Hugh Vincent Wilger Robinson, and I'll mention the Wilgers again shortly. RAF VR, Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve. He was serving with the 9th Squadron when he died on 9th November 1941, aged 30, and was buried in Ballylesson General Cemetery, which is there in the Netherlands. The personal inscription on his headstone states, "Younger son of Hugh and Annie Wilger Robinson, Belfast, Northern Ireland." So that's, say, in the Netherlands. But he's commemorated in at this plot in Drumbo. The next one then is this Nelson plot, and it commemorates Lieutenant Edward Charles Dalton Nelson. He died, as you can see there, it says in the headstone, Fleet Air Arm, and he's commemorated as killed 24th February 1942, interred in the port of Spain. He was serving with the Royal Naval Fleet Air Arm with 750 Squadron based at HMS Goshawk on the island of Trinidad, and this is HMS Goshawk here. So that's Lieutenant Edward Charles Dalton Nelson. Next one then is this one. This is a Duffin grave, and buried in here is Charles Grimshaw Duffin, and it says on the side of the fancy grave there, born Danesfort, died Ardleven, Dunmurray, August 1960. So Charles's father, Charles Duffin Sr., owned this house, or as it says on the headstone, on Charles Grimshaw Duffin's headstone, it's Danesfort. And Charles Duffin Sr. was a linen manufacturer and prominent member of the Ulster and Ulster Reform Clubs, and inherited Danesfort, one of the finest high Victorian mansions in Ireland, through marriage to Margaret Duffin Barber in 1883. Margaret was the only daughter of Samuel Barber of the linen dynasty of William Barber and Sons at Hilden, and she died on 20th of February 1947, aged 61, whilst living in Ardna Valley, Shaw's Bridge, so not a million miles away from Ballylesson. Danesfort, as depicted there, was later purchased by Gallagher Limited for hospitality purposes, and is now the office of the United States Consul General in Belfast. So the house is still there. People might remember Danesfort as being the headquarters of NIE, or now Power NI. Thanks to Gavin Bamford for the next one, and for the information on the next one. The headstone ends on the left is the Wilger headstone. I mentioned Wilger there slightly earlier. And then at the bottom of the grave, it commemorates William James Wilger, died 13th of October 1968. And that's a photograph of W.J. Wilger there, top left. So he was born at Ballylesson on 8th February 1892, and on 14th of July 1908 he joined the Northern Bank head office. Transfers followed to Donegal Square in 1909 and then head office for relief in 1911. So that's the Northern Bank office there, Donegal Square west. So of course there's still a Northern Bank of sorts there, now the Danske Bank, but obviously remodeled. I thought that was a great photograph. On 25th February 1915, William volunteered and enlisted in the 11th Battalion Loyal North Lancashire Regiment at the age of 23. He was promoted to second lieutenant and transferred into the Machine Gun Corps. Promotion to lieutenant followed. His first theatre of war is recorded as France from 12th March 1918. He saw service at the Somme in 1916, Mazine in 1917, Ypres in 1917, at Passchendaele, Cambrai in 1917. He was also in action as Allied retreat in 1918 and also the Allied advance again in 1918. During that he received one injury, a gunshot wound. He was demobilised in July 1919 when his address was recorded as Fernley, Lisburn Road, Belfast. He was awarded the British Victory Medal and the British War Medal, and then on 2nd September 1919 the Belgian Croix de Guerre. Following his demobilisation, he rejoined the Northern Bank on 16th of July 1919, worked at Grafton Street in Dublin. He was then transferred to Antrim in 1929, and he was elected as Treasurer of Antrim Royal British Legion. He then worked at Milford in Donegal and Letterkenny in Donegal in 1937 and Ballycastle in 1943. He was a member of Ballylesson Graveyard Hockey Club and secretary of Mazarine Golf Club, and he retired on 31st of December 1953. His name is recorded on the Church Roll of Honour, Malone Presbyterian Church. He was married to Anne Isabel Wilger, née Miller, and he died on, as I mentioned earlier, 13th of October 1968. So thanks to Gavin for providing that information, which is on the Northern Bank War Memorial sites. Maybe you might want to post up a link to that, Gavin, if you get a chance. Next one is in 1981. This is an RUC victim, and you'll see there the RUC logo at the top. It commemorates Philip Charles Ellis, killed in the execution of his duty 6th May 1981. And there's a picture of Philip Ellis there. He was shot dead at age 33 by an IRA sniper whilst on foot patrol in Duncairn Gardens. 6th of March 1981 was the day after Bobby Sands' death. He was born in Kirkcardine in Scotland, and he was the father of 5 children, with his wife expecting another baby when he died. He lived in the Beaver Estate, and the service was from the Beaver Parish Church, so not terribly far away from Ballylesson. So this is another member of the security forces during the Troubles and buried in Ballylesson Graveyard. This commemorates Brian Samuel Armour, a loving husband and father, Vice Chairman POA, Prison Officers Association Northern Ireland, murdered by terrorists, 4th of October 1988. So I can remember this one, and maybe my mum can as well. Brian Armour was killed aged 48 by an undercar IRA booby trap whilst driving off duty alone along a Beta Parade off the Beersbridge Road shortly after leaving his home. He was a member of the Northern Prison Service from September 1974 until his death on the 4th of October 1998. And I mentioned there he was Vice Chairman of Prison Officers Association. So Christopher John Hanna was a prison officer who held a senior position inside the Maze prison. In June 1990, he was sentenced to life imprisonment at McCabe for helping the IRA kill Brian Armour 2 years previously. Hanna was also accused by former UDA leader Andy Terry of complicity in John McMichael's death in 1987. Hanna passed on information to local Belfast actress Rosina Brown, with whom Hanna was infatuated. Brown was dubbed the IRA's Matahari, and she served as an intelligence officer for the IRA. Hannah also passed on information about armour to Brown, who was named at Hannah's trial. Hannah was also part of an IRA plan to stage a massive prison escape using weapons and explosives smuggled in by prison officers. The plan did not come to fruition. Alleged former IRA member Sean O'Callaghan, who became an informer for the Garda Síochána, was a fellow inmate of Hannah, whilst both were serving their respective sentences at McCabe. He described him as an extremely dangerous and irrational man. I don't think O'Callaghan was that pleasant a character either. Hannah died of cancer at the age of 45 on 27th of December 1992. So I think it was worth mentioning that he was the man that set up Brian Armour and resulted in his death. So that the old honey trap kind of scheme. So my granny lived for 57 years around the corner from a better parade in 5 Kensington Avenue. So I can remember that murder taking place not around the corner in 1988. It would be my last year at school. So the next one then is, oh sorry, and that's Brian Armour there. The left is when he joined the prison service, and then a more recent one for his untimely death. Next one then is this headstone, and it commemorates Lorna Dornan, and this is Lorna Dornan here. So she died from pancreatic cancer, aged only 50, on the 26th of July 1998. She was a mother of Lisa, Liesa, who works for Disney in London, Jessica, a fashion designer based in Falmouth in Cornwall, and Jamie, an actor, model, and musician. Jamie was born in Hollywood and grew up in the suburbs of Belfast and was 16 when his mother died. 4 of his friends were tragically killed in a car accident in Donegal only 13 months later, and they had all been students at Methody. Dornan had previously spoken honestly about attending counselling sessions after the events, saying it was so bleak and affects you every day. Jamie Dornan's father, Jim, was an obstetrician and gynecologist. He had also considered being an actor, and he died from complications relating to COVID-19 on 15th of March 2021, so in other words, only a few months ago. It's hard to see in this photograph, but the grave doesn't look as if it's been disturbed recently for the interment of even ashes. So I surmise that that Dr. Dornan he died in Dubai, so and he'd remarried again. So I surmise that he's buried out there, perhaps. That's Lorna Dornan. The next one is this one, and again you can see the giant's ring in the background just to the right of that shelter there, and it commemorates Margaret Elizabeth Stelfox nee Dodds. She died 29th of May 2006, and also George Mitchell Stelfox, he died 2nd of June 2009. So they were the parents of the man to the right, and that's Dawson Stelfox. James Dawson Stelfox, to give him his full name. He's a former chairman of Consark Design Group, and in May 2008, he was elected president of the Royal Society of Ulster Architects. Born in Belfast in 1958, he attended Rosetta Primary School, then went to Inst, and in 1976, he began to read architecture at Queen's University Belfast. His first job was with Conservation Architects Consark, which after a brief period of self-employment, he rejoined in 1995 and became their chairman in 2002. Among the many projects on which Dawson Stelfox has worked, Parliament buildings at Stormont, Belfast Christchurch, the Odyssey Arena, and the Ormo Gasworks, which is of course where Consark are based. Dawson Stelfox is best known for, in 1993, he led the Irish Everest expedition. When he reached the peak of Everest via the North Ridge on 27th of May 1993, He became the first person from Ireland to do so. He's past president and current board member of Mountaineering Ireland. And he used to live at the little cottage at the junction of the Malone Road and is it Murray Lane and near Lady Dixon Park. But now he lives in Crome Hill. Those Stelfoxes were also the grandparents of Chris Armstrong, who manages involved now, works for the East Side Partnership. Next one's this one, Robert J. McKinstry, architect. You'll see he's born 1925 and died 2012. He established his own practice in Belfast in 1956. His works include Ashfield Girls' School, 1973, and Ashfield Boys, 1975. Extensions to Pretoria Royal School in Enniskillen. Also the regional headquarters for the Open University in University Road, and the headquarters for the Royal Society of Ulster Architects to Mount Charles, Belfast. That might interest James Elson if he's logged in. And also the new council chamber at the in Queen's, also the Canada Room and the extramural department in the centre section of the Lanyon building. He's best known for his restoration work as consultant architect to the National Trust 1971 to 83. His most important works in the field were in the restoration of and upgrading of the Grand Opera House. You'll see it there when it was called the Palace Hippodrome to your left. And his wife, Cherith Rosalind D. Boyd, she worked on the ceiling. She's not, for some reason, she died in 2004 and she's not commemorated on the headstone. He also worked in the Crown Liquor Saloon in 1983, and there's the Crown in the interior to the right, and his own house at Crome Hill at Lambeg from 1967, and Crome Hill's listed below there. So that's also the house now that Dawson Stelfox, who was in the previous slide, lives at. For National Trust members, he also worked at the Arderess House in 1962, the Temple at Templewater Castle Ward in 1971, and he was also responsible for the total rebuilding of Malone House in 1983 after it was destroyed in a bomb attack. He also worked on the north transept of St Anne's Cathedral from 1981. So that's Robert McKinstry, and so responsible for quite a number of notable Belfast buildings. The next one is this man, Derek Bingham, a much loved husband, father and papa, 20th of October 1946 to 6th March 2010. Says at the base of the grave, formerly lived by faith, but now lives by sight. This is Derek Bingham here. He was a former minister of the Crescent Church in University Road. At its height, it was almost impossible to get a seat at Tuesday night in the Crescent. It appealed to people from far and wide, as well as students from Queen's. He came from a Brethren tradition, developed good relationships across the board. He was diagnosed with leukemia in 2009. He had a period of remission later that year. During his illness, he compiled a book of letters written while seriously ill called North of Shadowlands. So that's a kind of a nod to the Shadowlands of C.S. Lewis. And the book showed the kind of person which Derek apparently was: honest, deep, thoughtful, and imaginative. And he died, I say, in 2010. The next one is this one. You see bottom left, Canon John C. Bell, born 9th January 1933, died Christmas Day 2017. Beloved husband, father, and grandfather, rector of this parish, in other words, the church behind it, 1970 to 1998. And you'll see bottom left of the headstone, he was obviously a beekeeper. So this is the slightly newer section to the cemetery, and there are steps down into it now. There's a path down into it now, and There's a supporting wall, and you can see the wall was built by, on the plaque there to the right, by Mr. Edward Dodds, section of Holy Trinity, Ballylesson, and it's in memory of Canon Bell, rector of this parish since 1970 to 1988, and he's remembered there as a much loved and respected pastor, teacher, and friend. Speaking of friends, this is the next one then. This is Dr. John Gray, born 17th of January 1965, died 29th of July 2019. This is John here. He was described as after his death, he was described as an outstanding clinician, a brilliant colleague, and a true gentleman. He passed away aged only 54 on the 29th of July 2019. He was married with 3 kids. He was originally from the Antrim Road area in North Belfast, North Circular Road actually, and he'd studied medicine at Queen's, qualifying in 1996. He had already completed a biochemistry degree at Queen's College in Oxford, and had also undertaken reconciliation work at Corrymeela, Ballyscastle, helping young offenders. Following his death, his family described John as the rock of this family, a man who showed humility, kindness, and generosity until his last breath. The quote continues, John spent his days saving lives. The rest of the time he made life better for his wife and children, who he adored, and his wider family. It seems a cruel irony that a man who helped so many in their hour of need could not himself be helped when he became seriously ill on Sunday evening. Whilst his death leaves a huge hole in our lives that will never be filled, we know his final wish to donate his organs had transformed the lives of others. A final act of generosity that will continue to be an example to his children. So that's John there. John was one of my best friends, and he was my daughter's godfather. The next one then is Samuel Raymond McMichael, and you'll see there commemorated on the headstone. He served with the Ulster Special Constabulary, B Specials, and then the Royal Ulster Constabulary until April 2001. He was the chairman of the Ulster Special Constabulary Association. The USC was commonly known as B Specials or B-Men, was a reserve special constable police force set up in October 1920, shortly before the partition of Ireland. It was an armed corps organised partially on military lines and called out in times of emergency such as war or insurgency. It performed this role most notably in the early 1920s during the Irish War of Independence and the 1956-1962 IRA border campaign. The Special Constabulary was disbanded in May 1970 after the Hunt Report, which advised reshaping Northern Ireland security forces to attract more Catholic recruits. So McMichael worked laterally in RUC traffic branch and then in close protection, and as it says in his headstone, was chairman of the USC Association. He developed lung cancer, which then spread to the other organs, and he died in September 2019. The final headstone then is this one, and this commemorates Kazimierz Rudovich, 1946 to 2020, much loved husband, father, and grandfather. And then at the base of the grave, it says, "What we keep in memory is ours, unchanged forever." So my thanks to Russell Grant for pointing this one out on a recent tour that I did of Ballylesson. And I'd already noticed this grave, but I wasn't aware of the backstory to this man. So he was known as Rudy, and he was originally from Poland and fluent in 5 languages. He worked for the RUC, initially at Strandtown in the early 1990s, before he was promoted as an inspector in Newcastle. He was also a part-time pastor in a number of mission halls, including in Sandy Row in Belfast. Described after his death as one of the RUC's best-known characters, someone could fill a book about his exploits. It said that during a Drum Cree protest in Annalong, Rudy's police hat was stolen and set on fire, and Rudy was apparently devastated as it was his favourite hat. Also described as a truly inspirational leader of men, Rudy was married to Ralda and was father to Natashka, and Kazia was living in Cumber when he died on the 17th of August 2020. So subsequently spoken to people about Rudy, and even though they weren't maybe members of the security services, he was kind of a legendary man. So as it says there, one of the RUC's, as I said earlier, sorry, one of the RUC's best known characters. That brings us more or less up to date. He really only died, say, 19th of August 2020. So thanks for your forbearance. Of course, it'd be wrong of me not to plug my forthcoming 2020 book. It features 20 graves in each of 20 different local cemeteries, and Ballylesson isn't one of them. So, but there are 20 other graves throughout Northern Ireland. So way up to Derry, for example, and Drumbeg I talked about last week. That's all, folks. Thanks very much for listening.